A few years back, certain young men at Riyadh in Saudi Arabia collected the verses of the Qur'an that deal with embryology and approached Dr. Keith Moore and asked his opinion. Professor Keith Moore is one of the world's most prominent scientists in the field of anatomy and embryology and is the author of the famous book titled The Developing Human. This book is a scientific reference work and was chosen by a special committee in the United States as the best book authored by one person. Dr. Keith Moore was the professor of anatomy and cell biology at the Dean of Basic Sciences at the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Toronto, Canada. And for many years, he was the chairman of the Department of Anatomy. In 1984, he received the most distinguished award presented in the field of anatomy in Canada, the JCB Grant Award from the Canadian Association of Anatomists in the Council of the Union of Biological Sciences. After going through these verses, he was surprised. He said, "It has been a great pleasure for me to help clarify statements in the Qur'an about human developments. It's clear to me that these statements must have come to Muhammad from God, because almost all the knowledge was not discovered until many centuries later. This proves to me that Muhammad must have been a messenger of God." Professor Moore was asked the following question: "Does this mean that you believe that the Qur'an is the word of God?" He replied, "I find no difficulty in accepting this." In a press interview, certain critics asked him whether Muhammad has opened the abdomen of pregnant women and in different stages of pregnancy and has written this. Dr. Keith Moore smiled and said that many aspects regarding the early stages of embryo written in the Qur'an cannot be seen with naked eyes. That can be seen only through a powerful microscope. And no one has a case that 1400 years back there was microscope. To understand the importance of the above verses, we should be aware of the level of knowledge about embryology during the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's believed that the first article about embryology was written about 300 years before Jesus Christ alaihi salam, may peace from Allah be upon him, by the famous Greek philosopher Aristotle. At the time, the theory that was prevalent was pre-formation theory. As per this theory, a miniature form of human with head, body, hands and legs were found in the male semen or in the female secretion. Another theory was that actual formation and creation was from the menstrual blood. Aristotle took side with the second theory. The role of a male semen in reproduction was limited to the role of a catalyst, a chemical reactor in which the menstrual blood coagulated concentrated. Galen, who lived in the 2nd century AD, is believed to be the first man to write a book on the subject of embryology. His book was titled On the Formation of Fetus. Nevertheless, he struck to Aristotle's view. The original pre-formation theory was virtually demolished by Wolff. In the 18th century, he described that the beginning of a fetus is not in the form of a tiny human form, but from globulus, that is, cells from which the embryo was built gradually, step by step, starting from the shapeless globulus to the more complex human embryo. This phenomena was called epigenesis. However, this was not accepted by the medical field. 150 years after Leeuwenhoek first discovered the male sperm cells, spermatozoa, von Baer, who is considered as the father of modern embryology, in 1820s identified the ovum, that is female egg. During this period, Prevost and Dumas described for the first time cleavage, that is subdivision of the egg into building units of embryo. In 1839, Sean and Shaden put forward the doctrine of cells as being the biological units from which the whole body of animals or plants is built. 20 years later, the ovum and sperm were recognized as cells. In 1900, Dreisch separated daughter cells of a fertilized egg and allowed them to grow into complete embryos. Thus, ultimately, by the end of 18th century and beginning of the 19th century, the scientists recognized that the pre-formation theory is wrong, and fetus is not developed from a tiny human form. The scientists also recognized that from cells through different stages, embryo is developed, and again after undergoing different stages, the embryo becomes a fully grown baby. In short, man is created in stages. But Almighty God proclaims this fact 14 centuries back in chapter 71, verse 14 of the glorious Qur'an. وَقَدْ خَلَقَكُمْ أَطْوَارًا. You have been created in stages.